we're going to get started for our final panel of the day. I'd like to introduce Jen Hunter, who's our moderator for the final session, which is called How to Have a Life or Save It While in Politics, Lessons from the Trenches. I think this is a question that many of us have been wrestling with after hearing about the challenges of life in office throughout the day. I also want to just do a quick plug for the reception tonight. It is Equal Voices Recognitions Reception. We are going to be honoring 10 women who are our equal voice trailblazers, and three male champions who have been pivotal to paving the way for women in politics. So if you have not had a chance to register for the reception, please make sure you do so at the registration desk, and we will get that started at 5:30. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jen Hunter, who is a candidate for the Green Party and also the Vice Chair of the National Capital Region's Equal Voice Chapter. Thank you, Jen.
Thanks, Chief. And thank you very much. I recognize this is the last panel for the day, and I also am a new mom, so I'm breastfeeding my son out there, who some of you have met. So we are delighted to be here. We've got an incredible wealth of insight and experience on this panel, and we ourselves have many questions for you as well. What I wanted to do to start the panel today is have each of these wonderful women introduce themselves, so I don't read you their bios, because you can read them there in your kit, and they're very impressive. I would suggest you take a look at them. But I'm going to start with having each of these women introduce themselves and share a couple of minutes that inspired them regarding this title. So answering the question, how can you have a life in politics? Is it possible? Is there a way to have work-life balance? What does that look like? And just as a heads up, after we've heard the first check-in from our panelists, I'm actually going to turn the floor over to you to spend 3 minutes at your table and exploring what kinds of questions you have, because it's the last panel of the day, so we thought we'd get you involved early. So what questions do you have based on what you've heard, what you've experienced in your life, etc.? And we're going to take a few questions right off the bat to make sure that we actually gear this to meet your needs and your questions. So with no further ado, it is my distinct pleasure to start on the right side of the stage with the Honourable Senator Pat McCarney.
Hi. Actually, can you hear me? I'm a retired senator. Okay, but I'm from the West Coast. I have spent nearly 28 years in federal politics, 2 terms as an MP and 17 years in the Senate. I've sat on every side of the House, in government, in opposition, everything but the Speaker's chair, and so I can sum up my attitude about how to have a life and politics by saying 3 little words: don't even try. And I'm particularly biased about the fact that when I was first elected in 1980, I was a single parent and the only mum in Parliament west of the Lakehead. And it led me to very strong views about the fact that I do not feel that women who are mothers of young children, and I can give you some appalling examples, should try federal politics for reasons that you can ask me. I'm all for women in politics, don't get me wrong. I would say there are 3 things that you do have to do. You have to draw some sort of boundaries. It's impossible. I became extremely religious. Sunday was totally off limits. I was always a church goer before politics, but afterwards, believe me, Sunday was sacred. Secondly, have money. I have amazing number of women go into politics and don't have any money. My first campaign manager, when I said, why don't you run? He said, I can't afford it. Why he thought I did or could is his problem and became mine. The third one is stay healthy. There's nothing that will keep you on your feet more than regular exercise, swimming. I used to swim every day, even if I came in from the West Coast the night before, which meant that I often went to Cabinet with bloody, bleary eyes from the chlorine in the Minto Place pool, and I'm sure my Cabinet colleagues thought that I was, obviously a booze hound. I'll pass it to the next one.
Thanks very much, Senator. My name's Lisa MacLeod. I am the MPP for Nepean-Carleton. I'm probably the only local MPP or elected official on the panel today. And I'm actually going against the grain. Most people come to Ottawa to serve, and I go the other way. I go to Toronto. And so some of the issues that the senator has brought up are certainly things that my family deals with on a day-to-day basis. And I must say this to all of you. When I was about 18 years old, I went to a leadership convention. And I was so excited that the first person I saw when I got off the plane, because I grew up in Nova Scotia, was one Senator Carney. And today I get to sit right beside her on a panel. So it's a real privilege and an honor for me, because I was able to see, as a young progressive conservative, positive role models. And I know, regardless of what political affiliation any of you young ladies have here today, you can look around and there is a positive role model for you in your own political party, which has certainly changed over the years. For me, I got elected with an 11-month-old child. I was 31 years old, and I couldn't have done it and still can't do it without the loving support of my husband, who also works in politics. And we've had issues where I've had to come home from Toronto. Used to feel like I was a member of the Clampets. We would get in our SUV and we would drive home from Toronto to get home at 10 o'clock on a Thursday night. We'd have the dog, the child, a whole bunch of diapers, bottles, and the next morning be bright-eyed, bushy-tailed for a meeting. And really happy to be here today with somebody who was my constituency manager during that time. Her name's Beth Graham. Beth, why don't you give everybody a little wave? She's right here. Beth worked with me and became a constant as well. I think you have to choose your staff wisely. And I now have another young lady who's with me today, Kayla Furnett, who works in my constituency office. Kayla, why don't you give a little wave? I'm proud to say that I only have one male on my staff. The rest are females, so obviously we're high productivity. But good you caught it. It was a joke. Men are productive too. In any event, I've surrounded myself with people who are very supportive of me, whether that's my riding association, my staff, and certainly my family, because quite frankly, you can't do it by yourself. And though your name may appear on the lawn sign or the sign above the office or even in the newspaper, you are only one person of a group of people. And that you are the brand of that organization, but there are so many people behind you. And I think that is my recommendation to anybody who's considering politics, is to understand that you need a big team. That means your family, your friends, and the support staff and volunteers who are going to support you. So that would be my view, and now I'm happy to turn it over to somebody else who I just got to meet today, who I've watched and have admired in federal politics. Martha.
It's on now? Oh, yes. Thanks. Hi, Martha Hall-Findlay. I'm the Member of Parliament for Willowdale. It's great to be here. I just want to say to Pat that there are an awful lot of people in this room, me included, who are not able to do what we do without people like you who went through so much of the crap that you went through. And I would just, if we can just say thank you to Pat. Life up here is very different, I would say now, than not even that long ago. And I hope in some of the discussion that we have, we can talk about how the media treats women, how other women treat women, how our male colleagues treat us. From everything I've read and listened to and watched, I am pleased to say that it is much, much different and much easier for somebody like me than it was for Pat in her day. And it's only that way because people like Pat fought for that right and fought against some of the real challenges. A couple of things. I don't know quite how to say this, because I'm one of the most positive people about getting women, anybody actually, to run for public office. But you also have to be really pragmatic about it. And so when I say, yeah, but I'm actually single because of politics, it's probably not the most encouraging thing, but I am. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing for somebody like me, because I had a long marriage and I have 3 grown-up kids. And the second significant other I had, I'll just give you the little anecdote. I was actually running in the campaigned for the leadership of the Liberal Party in 2006, and we'd been together for about 5.5 years. And at one point, it was actually only a month before the convention, I got home and I just said, honey, not supporting me at all would be fine, but making me feel like crap every time I come home is just not okay. And so I left. And so there I was in my little apartment, screwing in IKEA bookshelves, thinking, I'm pretty damn sure that Michael Ignatieff and Bob Ray aren't sitting around screwing in IKEA bookshelves right now. But in any event, so I am single, and I have to say, in some ways, I love the space that I'm in because I can do what I do. And I will repeat the fact that I have 3 grown kids. I hope we can talk a little bit about the pragmatic aspects of this, especially at the federal level, and you're moving cities, and Nancy can talk about this in terms of having kids and having to travel long distances. It can be really, really tough. It's much easier for somebody like me. And we're not equal in our society yet. And I don't know that we ever will be. There's a part of me that says I don't know if that's really what we should have, but there is no question, you all know it, that women take by far the greater responsibility for children, for aging parents, for family life, all of those things, whether it's because we put it on ourselves, because society puts it on ourselves, because we choose to do that. We are far more responsible as a general rule for all of those things than the men are. And if we are going to accept that, then a career like being a federal MP, provincially too, because you know Lisa has big travel to do too. But it's not even just the travel. I mean, even municipal politics, it's a hugely time-consuming career. But it's also the best career you can imagine having. I mean, I love what I do. And so I do want to talk a little bit about how it's not awful for women now in the media. It's not awful now for women in the House. It's not awful now for women in terms of being treated badly by our male colleagues and not getting ahead. So, you know, there are some things that we've gone past, but it is an absolutely fantastic calling job. I love it. And I will just add that I spent a fair bit of time as a lawyer on Bay Street, and I spent a fair bit of time in senior management in a couple of different large corporations. And it was no bargain either. And yet all of the women who go into all sorts of different careers run into challenges as well. But we do them. So whenever somebody says, oh, well, I've thought about politics, but I'm not really sure because this isn't perfect or that isn't perfect for women, say, get over it. It isn't. It's much better now than it was, but everything that we do, almost everything that we do, has aspects of it that aren't perfect. But man, they're worth doing. And this is one. So there was a little bit of reality check in there, but I couldn't be so happier to be here and be as positive about this as a career as possible, but being pragmatic. And I'm looking forward to some of the back and forth.
Thank you. Hard act to follow. It is, as other people have said, a life of balance. I became a member of Parliament in 1997, June 2. And, well, I'm Nancy Karatek-Lindell. I was a member of Parliament for Nunavut. I came in 1997, and I represented the largest geographical riding in Canada, North and South America, and we weren't ever quite sure, but one of the largest in the world. 3 time zones and great distances to travel. I naively thought that I could commute between my community and Ottawa, and so that was what I tried in 1997. But I even hadn't been to every community in Nunavut, and that took me 3 years. I've traveled to every community to see every place in Nunavut that I represented. So that meant weekends I would try to go to a different community, and one time I didn't go home for 4 weeks because I was trying to go to different communities, and I would be invited to events, and as a new member, because you want your constituents to know that you're trying to represent all of them, I had to make some pretty difficult family sacrifices in the beginning of my MP career. My youngest was 7, and I have 4 boys. My youngest was 7, next one was 10, 15, and 17 when I got elected. So we found out very quickly that the only thing that we could do was move the family to Ottawa. And that was a very difficult decision because you want to live in your riding. And I kept my home in Elkvit, but it just became practical for us that I would at least see my family in the evenings if I'm not going to be here for the weekend. Very tough decision because our two youngest sons were still going to school in Inuktitut, and they hadn't quite phased over to English. They spoke English, but they'd never lived in the city. My community's only, at that time, maybe 2,300 people. And so moving them to the city was a very difficult decision, but one that we had to do. So sometimes you have to make decisions that benefit your family just so you can see them, so you can see your children at the end of the day. And one thing that I don't think has really come out is this is not a 9-to-5 job. No, it really isn't. Some days you have to go there a lot earlier if you have breakfast meetings or, something happening, meetings. And I'm very happy not to have to do breakfast meetings anymore. And the House adjourns about 6:45. So, this is not a 9-to-5 job. You really have to have someone in your home that can get the kids to the hockey practices and do the grocery shopping before stores close, or just make supper for the family. And you do have to have people around you that are able to fill some of those roles for you. And a year and a half into my position, and I don't bring out my personal life very much, but in order to put this into perspective, I feel I should. I was widowed at 40 years old, and we had 4 boys, and I was only a member for a year and a half. And as mentioned earlier, you have to have a supportive other half or husband when you're going into politics. You have to be grounded in your family. You have to have someone who's going to support you at home. And then when that disappeared for me, December 1998, I had to do some soul searching. I thought I would resign and be the only parent that my children had left. But I had a very supportive family, and I still do, and many friends that encouraged me to continue, that they would help me. And so I had to make a tough decision also, that I could not be a supermom, that I had to accept help from people that were willing to help me. And you have to, because you can't do this by yourself. You really can't. And I owe my sanity to my executive assistant at the time, Susan Scullion. She was there for me and did her work beyond the call of duty. And that's really, I think most of us have to have staff that are willing to go beyond the call of duty. Sometimes she had to go and buy my Halloween candy because I was flying home right that next morning. I didn't have time to go to Zellers or wherever, and she sometimes had to do things for me, take my kids to hockey practice, pick them up. She'd pick them up from the airport, and it's a balancing act. But at the end of the day, I felt that if my children knew that I loved them and that I would drop everything to be there for them if they need me, then that was the important message that I could leave with them. And sometimes they chose to go back to our community and do school as they got older. Like my third son went back and did his grade 8 in my community and lived with my uncle and his wife. And so we had to make a lot of adjustments in our lives. Being the only parent, I also went home and didn't do a lot of things in the evenings. Like many of my colleagues supported me, and I owe so much to my colleagues, and not just within my party, but everyone in the House of Commons, because they're the only ones that truly understand the demands on your time. It doesn't matter what party you belong to, but you know what that other member of Parliament has to juggle in their life. And so I received so much support from my colleagues, and some of them are here. I was probably one of the only members of Parliament that people willingly traded house duty for. And, you know, those are some of the things that we have to do to help each other. And I got to travel sometimes on Fridays so I could get home for the weekend, because it's a whole day of travel for me. So I had people willingly trade their house duties with me, and so that went a long ways. I didn't have a driver's license when my husband passed away, so my colleagues gave me a gift and said, okay, this is for your driver's training. So they helped me in that way. They become your family, and because we understand each other, they become your family away from your family. And so that was very, very important for me. And I turned down a lot of opportunities because of family, and I don't regret doing that. I know someone said that was a choice they made. It was also a choice that I made. You know, I got invited to do different trips to different countries, but some of them I turned down because I couldn't take that time away from my family. They were still very young. They're all grown up now, and I have 6 granddaughters, so I'm in a different phase of life now. But I think we survived juggling home and work, and I tried very hard to protect them, maybe too much, from the life on the hill. But I'm very proud of my sons, and I hope that they're able to support their wives if their wives want to pursue something, because they know what it's like to grow up with a single parent. Thank you.
Excellent. So you've seen the caliber and breadth and depth of experience amongst the women on the stage right now. We also know we are joined with many women in the audience and many men in the audience who have also had great experiences in serving this country in a variety of capacities. What I'd like to do right now is give you 3 minutes at your table just to talk to someone at your table, pick a partner, pick a couple people, and what are the burning questions that you have at your table that you'd like to hear reflected on, have a conversation about, have these women respond to? What are the things that you really want to know about? What are those practical things or those visionary things that are burning for you right now? So 3 minutes. I am a facilitator. I will keep an eye on the 3 minutes, and then I will call you back and we'll hear some of these questions and move on. Thanks.
What I think we'll do, we'll hear a few questions that are on the floor. I'm assuming they'll be things that the ones
Like actually then you have some video or perspective.
I think the other thing is too, like Mark and I really don't have that big of a commute. You and Nancy, when I went to Calumet and then on to Melbourne, I thought to myself at the time, how do these people, regardless if they're from Edmonton or British Columbia, wherever they're from, it's not getting in the plane and making it there in an hour and you be home. I need to be home. I can be home. You can't. And it's just, I don't know if I can do that.
No, a lot of people get lied to this. Yeah, people are so, I mean, I've some very funny stories about who shouldn't have been, about people who've been coerced to get the fight.
Well, hopefully those will happen.
Yeah.
All right, 10 seconds. Questions to the mics? If you have a question that's burning that you've talked about at your table, that was 3 minutes, believe it or not. We'd love to hear a few of these burning questions at the mic. So a few brave souls jumping up. There are 2 floor mics, one's here, one's there. And if you have someone specifically you'd like to respond to your question, feel free to ask one of the panelists directly a question, or if you'd like to hear several perspectives, feel free to ask that as well. So we've got several voices here. Please feel free to jump up and ask the questions. And what we'll do is we'll hear several of the questions, and then we'll hear some responses, okay?
Okay.
Great.
Okay, Sandra Ivanode again from McGill Women in-House program. So our table is interested in knowing how or if you can juggle being a student and running for election, even, and not necessarily federal. So in my case, I'm starting law school in September, so another 3 or 4 years in school after my MA, and so I'm hoping the next election, so let's say my 3rd year of law school, I might consider running, and so I just wanted to know if it was a possibility in your opinion in terms of time commitments.
Great question. Good question. Okay, next question.
Hi, my name is Beth Graham, and I am running for nomination in Ottawa, West Nepean. And I, as you heard, worked for Lisa MacLeod. So I saw Lisa every day deal with all of the things that tore at her time, at her professional time, her family time, and her personal time. And one of the things that I would like to ask you for the benefit of everyone here, and all of you can answer this question, is how do you separate yourself from the person that the press writes about, the negativity that you hear? I saw times when the press was terribly unfair. I saw when people that we thought were allies or friends disappointed and got very, it became, sometimes it was very offensive, disappointing. And I guess my question is, how do you deal with that on a day-to-day basis? Dealing with that, you have to put a happy face, if you like, with your children. You have to put it behind you somehow. Somehow you have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps the next day, no matter what happened the day before, and go forward. So what is it that you say to yourself that helps you cope on a day-to-day basis with all the things that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis?
Hi, I'm Nancy. I'm from Montreal. I'm really happy to get the experience that people are talking about, but what I find would benefit me more would be to hear more concrete things about what kept you going, why you maintained that kind of lifestyle despite the fact that it was so difficult. So maybe a bit more concretely, what kept you there, and whether the disadvantage or the difficulties were how they were counterbalanced by the changes that you were able to make. What changes were you able to make that kept you going? Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Hi there, Catherine McKenna. I'm from Ottawa. I have two very quick questions. One is, I think a lot of women struggle with when to run if they have kids. So do I run before I have kids? Do I run when I have little kids? Do I run when I have teenagers? And maybe I'm less connected to a lot of the issues that I'm really passionate about, like childcare. My first question, and I think the Honourable Pat Carney had something to say about that. The other question is whether you think running negatively impacted on your children. It was funny, I spoke with Sheila Copps about this, and she felt that her daughter is very resilient as a result of her career, and it was a positive experience for her. But I do worry, and I think a lot of people worry about the impact on their kids.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll take 3 more questions, so 1, 2, 3, and then we'll move on, okay?
Hi, Danielle from Brantford. I relayed a story to my table, and we thought we'd address it to the panel, and that is I recently met with a male MP on the Hill, and he expressed that he was always for women in politics and seeing more women in the House. That is until he actually got to the House himself, and that was because he saw women being very greedy in terms of what they were doing. They weren't cooperative in terms of talking about policy, that they wanted to go discuss it amongst themselves, and he didn't feel that was the most aptitude for bringing out democracy. So my question therefore is, if you were to see that in the lobby behind the House of Commons going on or whatnot, what would you say if you did see that, and if you think there's any validity into the male MP's perspective on that?
I just want to know who the male MP is. Who is it? We have 4 of us right here. We're ready to take them.
So we have a question here, and then we've got the panelists leaning forward. We can? So back there? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. I'm Isabel from Grand Barachois, New Brunswick, and I'm just wondering what are the different roles women can play in politics, or anyone can play in politics, because we talked about running for office, but I'm just wondering, I'm thinking in terms of myself, like I see myself more as an advocate for a specific issue, like example, inclusion for persons with disabilities. So I don't know if running for office is really going to best fit the role to accomplish what I'd like to accomplish and help people.
Great, thank you. This question, and then we're going to have some responses.
Karen Harrison, retired elementary school teacher, resident of Nepean. My question, and on behalf of our table, we agreed that we now live in the 21st century, and we're wondering, everybody on the panel, and maybe more particularly Senator Carney and Nancy, we've got technology now to cover this vast land of ours. What parts of your job, past or present, can you easily picture doing as effectively electronically from your constituency? Thank you.
Excellent. And there are 2 more people at the mic, but if you would write your question down and put them up, and when we come to we'll put you up at the end of this section, okay, so that we take your questions at the beginning of the question period at the end of after the panel has spoken, okay? So you 2 will be first up. I see you. We'll have you after we hear some responses, okay? Thank you for your patience. So, Senator Carney?
I will speak very briefly to a few of those points, and my colleagues here can speak to them and others. I'll answer the last one. In terms of technology, yes, we can do things with technology today. One of them is electronic voting. Taking 8 hours to fly across the country to do 2 or 3 votes last night in the House, and then 8 hours to go back because you have to give a speech is ridiculous. You can do electronic voting. Secondly, in the Senate and probably in the House, there are some Senate committee and House committee hearings which can be done with, I think, video conferencing. If you are presenting say Aboriginal leaders or disabled or people from your riding or your area as witnesses, and believe me, they don't want to come all the way from the West Coast for their 10 minutes before committee and 10 minutes of questions and then go back. So those are 2 areas which can and must come. Briefly on the other issues, in terms of separating the media and yourself, it's separating your job from who you are. Everybody who knows me knows I'm a kind, lovely person. But but when you're in the House of Commons and you're defending a government policy, your job is to defend the policy. It's not to be loving and kind, okay? Unless it's Mother's Day or something. When to run, I have probably talked more people out, men and women, of running than I've talked them in. And the issue here is not gender, it's got to do with who you are, okay? Some people shouldn't run for politics at all. Some people should run, I say, before or after their children are grown up, so they can dedicate the kind of time to it. One of my, just recently campaigning in Vancouver Centre, my former riding, the president of the riding told me that she was pregnant and thinking of running. I told her she was not going to do that. No debate. And when she became green and nauseous and was throwing up a lot, she thanked me for it. One woman was being pressured. I was called by the party to pressure this woman, talk this woman into running. She was from a Vancouver Island community. She had just adopted a street kid, as in a kid who lived on the streets. And I was supposed to talk her into running as a member of Parliament. So I phoned her and said, I understand you've adopted this child. Yes, well, what are you going to do with her? Are you going to leave her at home, or are you going to bring her to Ottawa? Well, I'm going to bring her to Ottawa. So I said, what are you going to do when you're back in the riding every weekend and then, on parliamentary breaks and that? What are you going to do with your lovely new adopted daughter who doesn't know anything about Ottawa? End of the day, she didn't run. Secondly, there was a man who was being pressured to run against the father of his stepchildren. Figure that out, okay? He's married to this woman. Her kids, he's supposed to run against the father of his stepkids, attack him on the, well, after I got through with him, they decided to raise dogs, okay? Instead. My final point, why do we do it? I think we're all motivated by the fact that we help people. It's not the glory, the days of glory, it's the fact that you help people. You do some little thing that changes a person's life. One of the earliest things I did as an MP, which people still remember 25 years later, is I got the Parliament to change the rules so that kids could travel with their parents to Ottawa. Before that, it was just spouses. Well, I was a single parent. I didn't have a spouse, and I found I couldn't bring my my son to come to Ottawa. When Madame Sauvé and I changed the rules so that he could, he didn't want to come anyway. So you don't win. Okay. But it's helping people. There are no real perks, but helping people is enormously satisfying, and why Martha says it's a wonderful, wonderful job. But, I would be a lousy doctor and a worse lawyer, but I was a very good politician, and that applies across the board to politics too. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Senator. Isn't she amazing? I'm very lucky to have Senator Carney here today. And her and I, from the same party, and somebody that I really looked up to, although I will say this about electronic voting, I actually take great pride in standing there when my name is called to cast a vote either for or against legislation, and I'll allow my colleagues to speak to that further. But for me, that's an amazing feeling because you're standing up and you're being counted. That's not to discount the role of technology today. Many of us are using these things called teletown halls, where we're actually able to, from anywhere in Canada, or probably even the United States, wherever we're at, allow tens of thousands of our constituents to talk to us over their telephone. And many of us are employing that new technique, and it's a great way to get back and talk to people through direct democracy. Also, social media has been, I think, in the last year and a half, really taken off in terms of political use, and for those of us who want to keep up to date with our constituents, whether we're sitting or we're traveling. And I think the role of technology is very useful in that regard. To answer the question, something that's near and dear to my heart, the lady that asked about when she should run. You should run when you feel it's right. When you've got that excitement in your belly, when you can't sleep and you can't eat because that's what you want to do and you want to make change, you go for it. your kids will understand, and I got to agree with Sheila Copps. My little girl, I take her to the legislature, she plays around, she now knows who the Premier of Ontario is, who the Leader of the Official Opposition is, she knows who all the federal leaders are, she knows who Jim Flaherty is, she has a great little chat. The only problem I have is when I practice my speech that she actually will tell some of her kids and at school, and sometimes when you're a partisan politician as well, particularly gearing up to an election, and you're talking about and this recently happened to me. I was actually in Tim Hudak's riding, who's our leader, and I was talking about, and I was practicing my speech to give that the McGuinty government was contemplating actually taking chocolate milk out of the school system, and so I didn't think my daughter was paying attention. She was coloring, and so I gave the speech. It was just a joke, you know. I just sort of, and he even wants to ban chocolate milk in schools. So we were leaving from Niagara, and we got to Burlington, and my daughter looks at me and she goes, "Mommy," and I said, "Yes, sweetheart." "Why does Dalton McGuinty want to take away my chocolate milk?" And I said, "Honey, he doesn't." I said, there was an idea out there, and you have to understand that they're very cognizant, but at the same time very responsive. I'm very fortunate. We've got a great speaker, Steve Peters, in the Ontario Legislature, who's made the place so family friendly. Any parent with a child in that legislature, whether you're a female or a male, can take their child there. Steve has a little bag for them, and let me tell you, there are a lot of us, and it's not just women who have children that are sitting in the legislature or in the House of Commons. There's men as well who appreciate that, who have children who are making that sacrifice. They're coming whether from Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, or Yellowknife, and they're making those trips, and they're sacrificing their families as well. So we have an opportunity, I think, as we have more women involved, is to actually start talking about making our lives a little bit family friendly. And just to Pat's point too, I think we do have the best job in the world because you do help people, and it's the small things, whether you get their hydro back on, or you're helping them with their OHIP card, or you've been able to channel through for my colleagues federally, the immigration system. For us, usually it's the healthcare system. There is nothing better than that when you know you've made a positive impact. And I can tell you something, if you have that fire in your belly to do that, go ahead and run. And because there is never a perfect time to run for office, and there is never your time or anyone else's time. You have to know in your heart that it's the right time. And if anyone here is like that and you feel that way, I encourage you to do it. Thank you.
There were so many great questions there. I'm going to try and address quickly the press negativity, the when to run, and the women in politics just aren't that great. I'm pretty sure that was how it came out, right? You didn't laugh. That was the reference to the male MP who came up here and thought women should get involved in politics, only to discover that in his view the women in politics weren't that great. I'm going to deal with that one last. The press, lighten up, guys, come on. You've been at this all day, right? Press negativity. I actually, and this is one of the examples where I think we've really come a long way. I don't believe that the press is any more negative toward women than it is to men. In fact, I would argue that the press now has become so worried about being chastised for being anti-women that the media is anti-women, that the media is in fact lighter on us. I will issue a little bit of a challenge over the next month. When you're reading the paper, every time you see a reference to Jack Layton's mustache, Stephen Harper's helmet head, Preston Manning's voice, you go back to Michael's eyebrows. Thank you. Yes, Michael's eyebrows. There are so many comments in the press about us as politicians that are awful. They don't necessarily the awful ones aren't necessarily just about what we wear and what we look like and how we sound. The media can also be pretty bloody awful about what we've said, our positions on issues. But I really do not believe anymore that I do not believe that the media anymore is worse on women than they are on men. And so I issue that challenge. I think that that's an assumption that I just don't see. Now, you are in the public sphere, but I would also challenge how many young people would shy away from becoming a rock star or a movie celebrity or some other calling that puts you into the public light, and they say, well, I don't want to be a movie star because, you know, I don't want to have to deal with the bad media. As Pat said, if that's the kind of person you are, you don't want to be out in the public and have what comes with it, whether it's a movie star in music or in politics, then you shouldn't do it. But there are so many benefits to this job that if you are willing to do that, if you are, just as if you were willing to do it if you had huge success in the arts, think about it in those terms and just say to yourself, is it worth the trade-off, and can I manage it? And yeah, you just build up a thick skin. So that one, I think, is a bit overrated when we're talking about whether people want to get into politics, because it's not actually that much different than a number of other walks of life. When to run, I will admit that I struggle sometimes with the focus that we have on we need to get more young women, we need to get more young women, we need to get more young women. It has nothing to do with anything against young women. It is the fact that by doing that, we are ignoring all of the old, as I say, all the old farts like me. And I say that because and it's not just a time of life that you choose to run, it's also recognizing that politics isn't, in most cases, and I don't think should ever be, a lifetime career. There are a few people on Parliament Hill who maybe have been around longer than they probably should have. But there are an awful lot of fabulous politicians who are only in public office for 5 years or maybe 10 years. An awful lot of people who get in young, contribute that fabulous perspective, and then go on to other things. There are all sorts of people who come to politics with other careers, and in a case like mine, after their kids had grown up, after they'd had other careers, after they'd achieved a level of financial independence, which made entering politics way easier. But I didn't even think about politics until I was 45. But I can guarantee that my role as a politician is far, far more substantive, and I feel I contribute way more because I have brought all of those other things to the table. But I really caution about the idea that this is a career like other careers in the sense that when do I run because I'm going to do that for the rest of my life. I think there are huge options, especially recognizing that we as women generally have other responsibilities, to look at politics as part of your life's work, as something that when you have the opportunity, or as Lisa said, when you just feel the need, you can do it, but if it doesn't work, you can go do something else. Or if you love it, daunting, oh my God, if I enter politics, it's I'm giving up my life or I'm whatever. There are just way too many opportunities, and it needn't be like that at all. And for the male MP who thought there should be more women in politics until he got up here and actually learned what women are really like up here, get a grip. I mean, women are women. You try. Yes, you can applaud. Women, okay, like we can be warm and loving. We can also be horrible, and we can be horrible to each other. If you go and listen to Question Period, some of the worst hecklers are the women, for God's sake. And we can be nasty, and we can, for this whole thing about we need more women in politics because we're kindler and gentler, and we're more consensus-driven, and we're more cooperative. I haven't seen that, but I haven't not just seen it in politics. I sure as heck didn't see it on Bay Street. I sure as heck didn't see it in the corporate world either. Some women and some men are wonderful, consensus-driven. They have different leadership styles. Others have very different styles. But to think that somehow, and to be somehow surprised when you get up here and realize that we can be just as political as the men, shouldn't come as a surprise at all. That's not a bad thing. It's great to see ambitious women. It's great to see women who are going to work hard. It's great to see women who know that they have to sometimes be tough. You don't have to be nasty, but tough. There are all sorts of things that we see for women up here in politics that are because that's what we do in the rest of our lives. Try raising a bunch of kids and being warm and loving and all the time. Just saying. Anyway.
I wanted to ask you, what about the third-year law student who's thinking of running? You're a lawyer. Do you think that's a good idea? While she's studying her third-year exam?
Well, I had I started first-year law with one child. The second one was born 3 days after my last exam of second year. Oh, no, wait a minute. That's so bad, eh? The first one was born in undergrad. The second one was born just before starting law school. The third one was born 3 days after my last exam in second year law. So I was doing a whole bunch of stuff while I was at law school. It really depends. If you run to win, and not everybody necessarily runs to win, and I'm a huge advocate of running regardless. I have enough losses to stand up and say running and losing is fantastic. It's still better to run and lose than not to run at all. Although ultimately winning was more fun. But it's like anything else. If you feel you're capable of juggling what you're doing in the 24 hours that you have in any given day, and you can do something else at the same time, then great. I mean, I guess I'm living proof that law school needn't be all-consuming. You can do other things at the same time. But a 36-day campaign, be prepared that it's it can be pretty intense.
And what do you think? Since you asked the question, what do you think? And then we'll get to Nancy.
I'm not a lawyer. I'm a planner by profession, and that's why I asked you. Does someone who's taking third-year law? I mean, if I was taking a PhD in certain disciplines, yes, you could possibly do that. But I asked you about law and law school and articling and getting top marks that you get with a good firm, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm just going to add that in my first campaign in 2004, my campaign manager was in the process of writing his bar admission course. And so he would only come to the campaign office at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but then he'd work into the late hours. Campaign manager works about the same number of hours or more than the candidate, and so in that case that was a great example of somebody who was doing that. It also depends on when. If it's right before exams, probably not a smart thing to do to go and commit to a 36-day campaign. So really it depends.
Can you hear me? Well, first of all, Pat, I want to really thank you, because the only way I could continue my job was because I could take my children with me. And they did travel with me to my constituency and other places. I really would have resigned if I couldn't take my kids with me, so I thank you for that.
Madam Sobe was this, I'd say, don't just thank me. I threatened to quit my seat unless they changed the rules, and I found that the all-male member, all the men in my caucus would be quite thrilled if I quit my seat and stayed home. But Madam Sobe was the speaker, the first woman speaker, and we had tea in her speaker's chambers, and she decided to change it to designated next of kin. So we have to thank her too.
Well, I thank you too, both of you. On the one that question about electronics, yes, we could do committee meetings electronically. I really could have used the electronic voting if it was possible. But there's certain things that you still have to do person to person. I think one of the difficulties in today's society, and I only talk about my children because I don't know, I don't like to generalize. when you do things electronically all the time, I think you lose that person-to-person touch. And I think, first of all, we have to remember we're human beings. It's very easy to be in the House of Commons and only see people as somebody that you don't know. And it's easier to, heckle them and hate them and, criticize them. You don't want to know that their mother is dying, or they had to put one of their parents in the old folks home because they have Alzheimer's. You don't want to know that personal things about them, that they're struggling in their lives too. So I think one of the things that I learned to do, and maybe because of my upbringing, being in a community where you know absolutely everyone, is people are human beings, and you want people to treat you a certain way, so you treat them a certain way also. So I was always taught that we had to respect people, whether we agreed with them or not, or whether we had the same beliefs. So that's a kind of member of parliament I tried to be, that if I respected them, hopefully they'll respect me too. And so I always say there's 308 ways to become a member of parliament. Everyone has their own road. They come from different backgrounds and different experiences, and they bring that with them. So sometimes some issues are not gender related, but it's the kind of person you are. And I would look at people, how they answer questions, how they treat other people, and say, okay, I don't ever want to be like that. And if you're a certain way, then the press picks up on that. And there were people that just tried to act outrageously because they want to be in the media. Well, I can tell you right now that I wasn't one of those people. I was probably one of the most quiet members of parliament. And I knew I had to leave because I was starting to heckle. So that's when I knew I had to go. But the negativity in press, I guess my experience was with the same-sex debate. That was probably the hardest issue I ever had to deal with. I come from a very traditional riding, and culturally very different, very religious. So it was a very difficult position that I took, because I chose to support the legislation. And the press and the people writing to me and telling me every hateful thing that they can was very difficult. But it was more difficult for my parents and my children. So trying to juggle that and make them understand that it's not so much for me personally. It's about the position I took as a member of parliament, and trying to separate those out and making people that love you understand that is very difficult. It was easier for me because, as Martha said, you have to develop a thick skin, so I tried not to take any of that personally, but it was very difficult for my children and my parents to listen to the radio or read things in the newspaper where someone's totally cutting me down. So you try not to, take those to heart, because, sometimes people say things by emotion and not so much, how would I say it? People say things emotionally that they might not say if they were thinking rationally. So I learned to separate those from my MP position and me personally. Timing, I think it's a personal decision that you have to make. I myself would not be able to do it with a small baby. So I applaud the ones that do, because I just would find it too difficult to juggle the travel, because again, coming from a riding like Nunavut where it takes a whole day to travel, sometimes it took me 2 days to get to a community and spend, half a day there attending a meeting, and another 2 days to get back to Ottawa. That's 5 days. And I couldn't do it with the baby. So It's a personal decision, as with everything in life. You know, there's never a good time for an absolute perfect time for anything, so you have to make certain decisions to do what's right for you. And the one about impact on your children, that is one that I still worry about today, even though my youngest one is 20 years old now. I worry sometimes if I soured them on certain things in life, a certain perspective on life, or would they be a different person if I had been a stay-at-home mother and didn't travel so much. But, you know, you can't go back and change things, so I hope the experiences that my children went through, and I think some of the things they're only realizing now, like my youngest one was in a program where I think he thought it was normal that he personally knew 2 prime ministers and many cabinet ministers that he had met, and to realize that not everyone had those opportunities. And so my children were exposed to different places. I was very encouraged by our Prime Minister to travel the country, and that was one of the best things that I ever did, because he said, yes, you represent a riding, not just me but the whole caucus. You represent a riding, but at the end of the day you represent the country. And so get to know your country was what he told us, and because of the travel points we have, we're able to travel in different parts of our country and not just our riding. And I took that challenge, and I now can say that I've been to every territory and every province in this country, because you have to know your country and you have to be able to understand where someone's coming from, because I always want people to understand where I come from and who I am as an Aboriginal person and what struggles I've gone through. So if I want people to understand me, I felt that I had to understand them too. And mind you, I didn't understand half the English at Torres Cove, Newfoundland, but I know they were upset at us.
Thank you, Nancy.
And so I learned so much from traveling around the country, and that to me was an education itself, because I'm one of those that didn't finish university. And so I learned about my country in a very different way. And so it depends, I guess, the reasons that you go into this public life, but I also tell people you have to go into it for the right reasons.
Nancy, if you don't mind, I'm going to there are 2 questions that haven't yet been answered, I don't think. One is the concrete. What are the concrete things that you do to keep yourself going? So I'd like to put that one out to this panel, as well as the question about different roles that came up. And I know there are 2 women who were at the mic who want to ask questions as well. So just quickly, could you offer one suggestion each about what is something concretely? We heard swimming and showing up bloodshot with bloodshot eyes is something specific. Stay healthy is a very reasonable and effective tip. But maybe from each of the 4 women here, what's one specific thing concretely you could do? And also maybe if you have anything to offer around different roles, like advocacy or different perspectives people can play in service of their country. That's I think we should address those 2 questions as well. Do you want to start?
Well, certainly. In terms of what keeps you going, basically it's love of country and love of opportunity. My issue is not with running for Parliament. My issue is when, given your other responsibilities. But what keeps you going is the feeling that this is such a fantastic country, and one of the things that I speak about all the time, it's the best country in the world to allow people access to run for Parliament. It doesn't cost us $1 billion or $1 million. I mean, you go to jail if you spend too much money, or your agent overspends your limits. I mean, I ran with about $8,000 collected by my volunteers. In Canada, you don't need money to run for Parliament, and in almost every other country you do. Anyone who's a Canadian citizen who hasn't been in jail recently can run for Parliament. So love of country, I think, keeps you going. And in terms of role of women, everything helps. You've heard, you can be on an executive of your riding association. You can just drive the dead tired candidate. You can pick up the MP at the airport. You can just give support. You can take over a casserole. When I first was elected, a friend moved into my Vancouver Centre house to look after my 15-year-old son from Monday till Friday. I left in the morning and I came back Friday night. I mean, there's so many things you can do to encourage women in Parliament, and there's so many roles you can play, and you play roles on the Hill, in the constituency office, in the riding association. Just do it. Thanks.
Well, I'll go next. Margaret Mead once said, and it's something to the effect of, never forget that it's a small group of committed citizens who can change the world. Indeed, that is the only thing that ever has. And so I think often of that, because I think it typifies leadership, but even more so, I think it speaks to every person in this room who may have something in their community that they want to positively change or affect. Just go do it. The best advice my dad ever gave me was take the initiative. And I always remember that advice, and he's long since departed now. But it's important that if you see something that needs to be changed in your community, don't wait for someone else to do it. You can do it, and you can do it to serve your community better. And it may, if your end goal is to run for politics, that will actually build up your credentials. So I suggest that. I want to talk a little bit about the balance. I think the first question that you had asked about what practical things can you do. If you decide you want to do this and you have a small family, what you need to do is remember, never let the laundry pile up. Always make sure that your deep freezer is full. Ensure that you make sure that there is time for your children and your husband. Your partner in life also needs to feel that he's a partner at home and a partner or she is a partner throughout your entire life, not just as a political process. One thing that I do is Friday nights, there is never anything on my calendar. I coach ringette. And I look funny in a helmet, but I go out there with my 6-year-old daughter on Friday nights, and we skate. We do not do anything on Sunday. We try to get to church. Some days we do have chores around the house, but you have to make sure that you carve out that time. And I will often just go ahead, because you're not supposed to schedule your own self into anything, I've learned, because that conflicts with your own scheduler. But I do it anyway. I just say book off, and I take that day. If I know my daughter has a PD day coming, I book that day off, because your family always has to come first. There's always challenges, no matter what job you have in this world. You're going to have to make sacrifices. In our job, it's a little different. Having said that, we do have generous amounts of time where we are in our constituencies, where we are not traveling, and we are able to arrange our schedules around some of our other obligations. So, again, I think just as in anything, you have to be very practical in how you approach your up-and-coming political career.
Some of the things that help to keep you going, you have to be able to say no, and maybe it's just no to an event, no to, I'm just trying to think of, there are all sorts of things in the house. No, you're not going to have that party. No, you're not going to go out that night. No, you're not going to, you're not going to take on that extra task. Even being elected, I'm currently the critic for international trade. I get asked to meet with all sorts of people, and at some point you have to be able to say no. You have to learn when to say no, that you cannot be super person. That's true for the guys too. I just find that too often women tend to, for whatever reason, for sure most of the women I know tend to want to do more, and they aren't as good at saying no. In terms of other opportunities other than actual public office, there are lots. And I think the woman who asked the question involved in advocacy, I was involved in the Couchiching Institute on Public Affairs for many, many years. And it was a fantastic outlet for somebody like me who was interested in policy, but was not at that point interested in elected office at all. In fact, one of the things I enjoyed most about Couchiching, and still do, is that it is nonpartisan. And so you have opportunities to, and in that setting, it's an annual conference, people leave there who are decision makers, and they leave better informed. And so when you're there and you're participating, you are actually helping the decision makers determine how they're going to decide. That's incredibly powerful too. So yes, you can help individual candidates, yes, you can be riding associations, but there are all sorts of other organizations to have your voice heard. And so, and I would argue that being involved in some of those other things before running for public office is also a wonderful thing, and may be the encouraging that you need to run for public office. But finally, the thing that keeps you going, for me, if you walk into my constituency office, our constituency office, the whole left wall is what we call our wall of thanks. It is unbelievable how good it is when you know you've done something good for somebody. And as a member of parliament, you can do good things on a macro level, so you can change legislation. I, for one, am incredibly proud of the fact that Canada didn't wait for the rest of the world to it's legal. You know, we were one of the first countries in the world to do that. That's really, really fantastic. So as a legislator, and it's not just because so you can say it, it's because that changed the lives for an awful lot of people. Being pro-choice, right? Like that, things like that significantly affect people's lives for the better. And so the opportunity to do that is wonderful. But as an MP, you also have the ability to change lives. I have this great painting that's like this weird color, red, blue, Canadian flag thing, that it looks a bit abstract, but it was actually done by a 6-year-old, and it's fantastic. She painted this for me, and it's hanging in my wall because our office, and I'd love to take credit, but you know, it's our whole office is a fantastic team, was able to have her brother, who wasn't born in Canada, although the rest of the family was here, join his, at that time, 3 brothers and sisters and parents in Canada, because for whatever was happening, he was being denied. The kid was 4 years old, but he was being denied access to Canada. Do you know how great it feels when you can actually do something like that? And it happens. And so, but the final thing I will say, and I know you want us to, we're all way too long, we're politicians for God's sake. How many people in here have traveled outside of Canada? How many people, when you came back, went, oh my God, this is a fantastic country? And how many who didn't travel also already know that this is a fantastic country? Yeah, right, pretty much everybody. So all I can say is that we have one of the most amazing countries in the world, if not the. And it didn't happen by accident. It didn't just happen. It happened because people governed this country. It happened because people made a choice to run for public office, to get involved, and to make all of those legislative decisions, all of those decisions that have helped us become the country that we are. And so I have 3 kids. They were all raised with the mantra, drove them crazy at times, but it was, don't complain if you're not willing to do something about it. You want this country to stay as good as it is and get even better, and you think you have some ways to be able to do it, or you're complaining about things that you like that you see that you don't like. That's why we do what we do. And it is incredibly satisfying. Incredibly satisfying. So for all the negativity, that's why you'll ask any former politician, would you do it again?
So I think that's actually going to have to wrap us up, believe it or not, because we are now at 4:46.
Can I just add very, very short?
Sure.
Why do I do it? Or why did I do it? I come from a people that, as you heard this morning, that were not allowed to vote in Canada until 1960. And yet we're the first peoples of this country. I come from a people that had no say in where their children went to school. I come from an area where people were not the decision makers, even though they were the majority of the people in our communities. Someone else came and decided that they knew what was better for us and made those decisions for us. So I was able to sit in the House of Commons and think of all the people that had no voice. My parents, their generation, and other people that don't even speak English or French. And so I was the voice for people that otherwise did not have a voice. And I did not take that responsibility lightly. And so for all the people that we were able to help and be part of this country that we belong to, that gave me the push to continue, even though it was very difficult for me at times. So you do it for the people that can take that helping hand and that are so thankful for the work that you do. For the one thank you that you get for the 99 negatives, it's all worth it. Thank you.
I'm glad you took that moment, and I thank you for giving voice when voice needs to be given. So thank you very much for doing that in service of this country. All four of these women have and continue to bring, I think, to light a lot of goodness in this country and have helped us shape the nation and continue to do so. So thank you very much to all of you for bringing your wisdom. We've got the tip of the iceberg here, as you can tell, and I know there are 2 more questions out there and probably some more. So hopefully this actually gives us fodder for a wonderful conversation over cocktails and a huge celebration of equal voice as it hits its pre-adolescent phase, 10 years and growing, and we're grateful for this opportunity to explore this conversation more deeply as the Leadership Summit continues. Thank you for your participation, and thank you very much for your voices.